Victoria Ashford stood frozen in that old garage doorway, red dress trembling, hand pressed against her mouth. Her daughter was walking, actually walking, without braces, and the man who made the impossible happen wasn't a specialist or surgeon. He was a poor mechanic carrying a grief as heavy as her own. The rain hammered against the windshield like 1,000 tiny fists as Victoria Ashford gripped the steering wheel of her black Escalade. The engine coughed once, twice, then died completely in the middle of Route 7, just outside the small town of Millbrook, Ohio. "No, no, no, no!" Victoria slammed her palm against the dashboard. "Not today." She had an appointment in 45 minutes. Dr. Harrison, the neurological specialist from Cleveland, was flying in specifically to examine Emma. This was the 14th specialist in 3 years. The consultation alone cost $8,000. Victoria pulled out her phone, dialing her assistant with trembling fingers. "Catherine, I need a car now. I'm stranded on Route 7, somewhere outside." She looked around. Fields. A gas station half a mile back. And directly ahead, a weathered sign that read, "Santos Auto Repair." "There's a garage nearby. How fast can you get someone here?" Catherine's voice crackled through the speaker. "At least 2 hours, Mrs. Ashford. Traffic from Columbus is terrible with this storm. 2 hours, the appointment would be ruined. Another specialist, another opportunity wasted." "Mom?" Emma's voice came from the passenger seat, soft and uncertain. "Is everything okay?" Victoria closed her eyes for a moment. Nothing had been okay for 3 years. "Fine, sweetheart. Just a small problem with the car. Stay here." She stepped out into the rain, her Louboutin heels immediately sinking into the muddy gravel as she walked toward the garage. The building was old, the kind of place Victoria would normally never notice. Faded paint, rusty tools visible through the open bay door, a radio playing country music that she could hear even through the downpour. Inside, 2 cars were propped up on lifts. The smell of motor oil and coffee filled the air. Somewhere a man was whistling along to the radio. "Hello?" Victoria's voice came out sharper than intended. "I need assistance." No response. She stepped further inside, her wet heels clicking against the concrete floor. "Excuse me, is anyone here? I have an emergency." A pair of worn boots appeared from beneath a Ford pickup. Slowly, a man slid out on a mechanic's creeper, wiping his hands on a rag that had seen better days. Marcus Rivera was 28, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes that held something Victoria couldn't immediately identify. He stood up slowly, unhurried, as if the world outside with its appointments and emergencies simply didn't apply here. "Afternoon, ma'am. What seems to be the trouble?" Victoria launched into an explanation, her words quick and clipped. The car had stopped. The engine wouldn't turn over. She needed it fixed immediately, or at least needed a tow to a proper dealership where competent professionals could— "Mind if I take a look?" Marcus interrupted calmly. Victoria blinked. She wasn't used to being interrupted. "I suppose, but I should warn you, it's a new model, very sophisticated electronics." "I doubt—" Marcus was already walking past her, toward the Escalade sitting dark and silent in the rain. Victoria hurried after him, holding her designer jacket over her head as a makeshift umbrella. He popped the hood with practiced ease, leaning over the engine while rain soaked through his coveralls. Victoria stood nearby, checking her watch every 30 seconds, mentally calculating how much money this delay was costing her. Marcus worked in silence. His hands moved with a certainty that seemed almost intuitive, as if he could feel what was wrong rather than diagnose it. After a few minutes, he straightened up. "Fuel pump relay. I've got one that'll work temporarily. Full repair will take about 3 hours." 3 hours? Victoria's voice pitched higher. "That's unacceptable. I have an important appointment." "Ma'am." Marcus's voice was quiet but firm. "I can try to rush it, but if I do, something might get missed. And if this goes wrong again while you're driving with your daughter in the car—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Victoria felt something cold slide down her spine that had nothing to do with the rain. "Fine, 3 hours." She turned back toward the garage, then paused. Marcus was still standing by the car, but he wasn't looking at the engine anymore. His gaze had drifted to the passenger window where Emma sat waiting. Through the rain-streaked glass, Victoria could see the outline of Emma's leg braces. Metal and plastic and straps that held her daughter's legs, in positions they couldn't maintain on their own. Something shifted in Marcus's expression. A flicker of pain, so brief Victoria almost missed it. His hands, which had been steady and sure while working on the engine, trembled for just a moment. "Is there a problem?" Victoria asked, her voice sharp with sudden protectiveness. Marcus blinked as if waking from a dream. "No, ma'am, no problem at all." But his voice had changed. Softer, almost wounded. Victoria hurried back to the car, opening Emma's door. "Come on, sweetheart. We need to wait inside." Emma looked up, her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, her face showing the exhaustion that had become her constant companion. "How long?" "A few hours. Doctor Harrison will have to reschedule." Emma's expression flickered. Was that relief? Before settling back into neutral. "Okay." Getting out of the car was a production. It always was. Emma had to position her braces just right, grip the door frame for support, lower herself carefully to avoid jarring her hips. Victoria reached out automatically to help. "Mom, I can do it." The words were quiet, but they carried years of frustration. Victoria stepped back, hands raised. She watched helplessly as Emma struggled to stand, each movement calculated and careful. The braces clicked and shifted. Emma winced, just once, barely visible, but Victoria caught it. "Does it hurt? We should check the alignment. Maybe Dr. Patterson was wrong about the settings." "I'm fine, Mom." Emma began the slow walk toward the garage, gravel crunching beneath her specialized shoes. Victoria hovered nearby, ready to catch her if she stumbled, already planning which specialist to call about the obvious pain Emma was trying to hide. Inside the garage, an older man emerged from a back room. He was perhaps 65, with silver hair and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. He wore coveralls similar to Marcus's, but his had a patch that read Frank. "Well now, looks like we've got visitors. Welcome to Santos Auto, ladies. I'm Frank. Can I get you some coffee while you wait?" Victoria glanced at the coffee pot, which looked like it hadn't been cleaned since the previous decade. "No, thank you." Emma lowered herself onto a bench near the window with visible relief. Her eyes wandered around the garage, taking in the old cars, the tool-covered walls, the photographs pinned to a corkboard near one of the workstations. Victoria pulled out her phone, already dialing Dr. Harrison's office. She paced near the door, speaking loudly about rescheduling, costs, insurance approvals, the urgency of Emma's condition. Frank watched her for a moment, then turned to Emma with a warm smile. "That's quite a storm out there. You doing okay, sweetheart?" Emma nodded, a small smile forming. "I like the rain, actually. It's peaceful." "That it is." Frank settled into a worn chair nearby. "My wife always said rain was God's way of telling us to slow down. Of course, not everyone listens." His eyes drifted to Victoria, who was now arguing with someone about appointment fees. Emma followed his gaze. Her smile faded. "She's just worried," Emma said quietly. "She's always worried." "Parents do that." Frank's voice was gentle, "especially when they feel helpless." Something in his tone made Emma look at him more closely. But before she could respond, Victoria hung up the phone with an exasperated sigh. 3 weeks. The next available appointment is in 3 weeks. Do you understand how much damage can occur in 3 weeks? She wasn't really asking anyone. She was spiraling the way she did when things went off script. Emma closed her eyes. This was the familiar pattern. The panic, the planning, the endless appointments that never seemed to fix anything. Outside, through the open garage door, Emma could see Marcus working on their car. His movements were methodical, almost meditative. He didn't rush, didn't check his phone, just worked. At one point, he glanced toward the garage and caught Emma watching. He didn't look away or pretend he hadn't noticed. He simply nodded, a small acknowledgement, then returned to his work. It was such a simple gesture, but it was the first time in months that someone had looked at Emma without immediately looking at her legs. Victoria was back on the phone, calling another specialist, someone in Chicago who had supposedly worked miracles with cases like Emma's. Her voice filled the small space, sharp and desperate. "I don't care about the waiting list. Do you know who I am? Do you know what I'm prepared to pay?" Frank stood quietly and walked to the back of the garage. Emma watched him go, grateful for the brief moment of peace. Outside, Marcus had moved to the front of the car, leaning into the engine bay. His hands paused for a moment, and Emma saw him look toward the garage again, not at her mother still arguing on the phone, but at the empty space where Emma had been sitting. When he saw she'd moved to a different bench, closer to the window, something in his posture relaxed. He went back to work. The rain continued to fall. 20 minutes later, Emma needed to use the restroom. She stood carefully, gripping the bench for support. and began the slow journey toward the back of the garage where Frank had pointed earlier. Victoria didn't notice. She was still on the phone, now with her personal assistant, reorganizing Emma's entire treatment schedule for the next month. Emma walked slowly, each step deliberate. Her left hip ached. It always ached, but she'd learned to hide it. Mentioning pain only led to more appointments, more examinations, more of her mother's frantic energy focused on fixing what couldn't be fixed. She passed Marcus's workstation. On the wall, she noticed something that made her pause. A photograph of a young girl, maybe 11 or 12, with dark hair and a bright smile. She was wearing leg braces similar to Emma's. Before Emma could look closer, she heard her mother's voice cutting through the garage. "Emma, where are you going? Do you need help?" "Restroom, Mum. I'm fine." "Wait, let me—" "I said I'm fine." The words came out harsher than Emma intended. She saw her mother flinch, phone lowering for just a moment, and felt a stab of guilt, but she kept walking, because stopping meant surrendering, meant becoming the broken thing her mother seemed determined to fix. Outside, Marcus had paused his work. Through the rain, he watched Emma make her way across the garage floor. His jaw tightened. When Emma finally reached the restroom door, she allowed herself one small moment of victory before stepping inside. Behind her, unseen, her mother stood frozen in the middle of the garage, phone forgotten in her hand. For just a moment, the mask of constant motion and planning slipped, and something raw flickered across Victoria's face. Fear, helplessness, the terrible knowledge that all her money and all her determination couldn't give her daughter back what had been taken. Frank appeared beside her, offering a cup of terrible coffee she hadn't asked for. "Hard, isn't it?" he said softly. "Watching them struggle when all you want is to carry them." Victoria didn't answer, couldn't answer. She took the coffee. Outside, Marcus finished the preliminary work and stood staring at the space where Emma had been sitting. His hand drifted unconsciously to his chest, pressing against something beneath his coveralls. A photograph he carried everywhere. A girl who would never walk again. A debt he could never repay. He looked at the Escalade, thought about the braces he'd seen through the window, and made a decision that would change everything. But not yet. Not today. Today he would fix the car. Send them on their way. Return to his quiet life of penance and memory. Today he would pretend he hadn't noticed that Emma Ashford's braces were adjusted wrong, causing pain that no one else seemed to see. Today he would pretend his hands weren't shaking. 2 weeks had passed since the rainy afternoon at Santos Auto Repair. Victoria had the Escalade towed to a dealership in Columbus the very next day, refusing to return to that run-down place. She'd paid triple for expedited service and never looked back. But Emma had looked back. She couldn't stop thinking about the garage. About Frank speaking to her like a person instead of a patient. About Marcus, the mechanic who had looked at her eyes before her legs. The first time Emma returned, she took an Uber after school. Marcus was underneath a Mustang, only his boots visible. "You lost?" His voice came from under the car. Emma's heart jumped. "How did you know someone was here?" Different footsteps, lighter than Frank's. Slower than a customer in a hurry. He slid out, squinting against the sunlight. "And I don't get many visitors in designer sneakers." Emma looked at her orthopedic shoes. Expensive but almost normal looking. "I wanted to say thank you for fixing our car. My mum wasn't exactly gracious." Marcus wiped his hands on a rag. She was worried. People act different when scared. She's always scared. It's exhausting. Marcus just nodded, like he understood something she hadn't fully said. That was the first visit. The second visit, Emma told her mother she was studying at a friend's house. Instead, she watched Marcus rebuild a carburetor while he explained how engines worked. He asked what music she liked, what shows she watched. Normal questions nobody asked anymore. The third visit, Emma brought homework. Frank made her a grilled cheese without asking if she was hungry. Now it was visit number 4, and Emma found herself telling Marcus things she'd never told anyone. "The Sweet 16 is in 5 weeks, she said, pulling at a thread on her jeans. "Mom's planning this huge thing. Country club, 200 guests, live band." Marcus didn't look up from the engine he was tuning. "Sounds fancy." "It sounds like a nightmare." Emma's voice dropped. "There's supposed to be a father-daughter dance. It's tradition. But my dad is dead, and even if he wasn't—" She gestured vaguely at her legs. "I can barely walk to the bathroom without looking like a baby deer on ice. How am I supposed to dance in front of 200 people?" Marcus's hands paused on the wrench. He straightened slowly, turning to face her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Who says you can't dance?" Emma laughed bitterly. "Every doctor we've seen, every physical therapist, every specialist my mother has dragged me to for 3 years, they all say the same thing: this is as good as it gets. Learn to accept limitations, focus on quality of life." "That's not what I asked." Marcus pulled up a stool and sat across from her, his oil-stained hands resting on his knees. "I asked who says you can't dance." Emma opened her mouth to repeat the list, then stopped. She looked at Marcus, really looked at him, and saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. He wasn't being rhetorical. He was asking because he believed the answer mattered. "Tell me about your dad," Marcus said quietly. The shift caught Emma off guard. "What? Your dad? What was he like?" For a long moment, Emma didn't speak. She stared at the concrete floor, at the oil stains that made patterns like abstract art. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "He was everything. Strong and gentle at the same time, you know. He called me his angel, said I danced like I had wings." Her throat tightened. "When I was little, I'd stand on his feet and he'd waltz me around the living room. Mom would pretend to be annoyed, but she always watched, always smiled." Marcus nodded slowly, encouraging her without words. "He died 3 years ago. Car accident. We were coming home from his birthday dinner." Emma's hands twisted in her lap. It was raining. Mum was driving. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken weight. Marcus didn't offer empty comfort, didn't say he was sorry or that it wasn't anyone's fault. He just listened, and somehow that was exactly what Emma needed. "She blames herself," Emma continued. "Mum, she was checking her phone, work email or something, and she didn't see the truck until it was too late. Dad died instantly. I walked away with—" She looked down at her braces, visible beneath her jeans. "Well, I didn't exactly walk away." Silence filled the garage. Outside, a bird sang somewhere in the trees. The radio played softly, some old country song about lost love and second chances. "I had a sister." Emma looked up sharply. Marcus had never talked about himself before. "Lily, she was 12 when she died, 5 years ago next month." His voice was steady, but his hands had started to tremble slightly, the way they had that first day when he'd seen Emma's braces through the car window. "She had mobility issues from birth, wore braces just like yours. Doctors said she'd never walk without them, never run, definitely never dance." Marcus stood and walked to his workstation. He pulled a photograph from the wall, the one Emma had noticed on her first visit. A young girl with dark hair and a radiant smile, wearing leg braces and a purple dress. But Lily was stubborn, the most stubborn person I've ever known. She practiced every single day, even when it hurt, especially when it hurt. He handed the photo to Emma. The girl's eyes sparkled with life, with determination, with something that looked a lot like joy. She wanted to dance at her school talent show. First time ever on stage, spent months practicing a routine to her favorite song. Marcus's voice cracked almost imperceptibly. "I promised I'd be there, front row, told her I'd clap so loud they'd have to turn up the music." Emma held the photograph carefully, sensing they were approaching sacred ground. "What happened?" Marcus turned away, facing the window. His reflection showed a man fighting to keep his composure. "Day of the show, I got called into work. Emergency repair for some rich guy who needed his car fixed before a big meeting. Good money, really good money." His shoulders rose and fell with a deep breath. "I told Lily I'd make the second half, told her I'd be there for her solo. She was disappointed, but she said okay. She always said okay. That was Lily. Never wanted to be a burden." The silence stretched. Emma didn't dare breathe. "She never made it to the school." Marcus's voice was hollow now, emptied of everything except the words. "She was so excited she ran out to the car before my mom was ready. Another driver ran a red light. Lily was crossing the street and—" He couldn't finish. Emma felt tears streaming down her cheeks. She hadn't even realized she'd started crying. "I wasn't there." Marcus finally turned back, and Emma saw that his eyes were wet too. "I chose money over my sister. I chose some stranger's car over watching her dance. And I never got to see her on that stage. Never got to keep my promise. It wasn't your fault," Emma whispered. "You didn't run the red light." Marcus smiled sadly, the kind of smile that held years of sleepless nights. "Wasn't it? If I'd been there, maybe we would have left later. Maybe we would have taken a different route. Maybe I would have been holding her hand when she crossed that street." He sat back down, closer to Emma now. "Guilt doesn't listen to logic. It just sits there, waiting, reminding you of every choice you made that led to the moment you can't take back. Emma absorbed his words, feeling them resonate somewhere deep in her chest. She thought about her mother, always frantic, always planning, always trying to fix, never stopping long enough to just be. "My mom," Emma started slowly. "I never thought about her guilt. Only my grief, my legs, my loss." Marcus nodded. "She was driving. She walked away without a scratch while your dad died and you got hurt. Imagine carrying that." For the first time in 3 years, Emma considered her mother not as the woman who couldn't stop trying to fix her, but as a woman drowning in blame she'd never spoken aloud. The realization hit like a wave, and suddenly, everything looked different. "How do you live with it?" Emma asked. "The guilt." Marcus considered the question seriously. "You don't live with it. You live through it, one day at a time, by turning the pain into something that helps someone else." He gestured around the garage, at tools and parts and pieces of projects Emma hadn't paid attention to before. In the corner, she now noticed a custom wheelchair with hand-painted flames on the wheels. Nearby, an adaptive bicycle built low to the ground, something that looked like modified leg braces attached to springs. "What is all this?" "Projects," Marcus said simply, "for kids in the community who need them. I started after Lily died. Couldn't sleep anyway, so I figured I might as well do something useful." Frank appeared in the doorway holding an old photo album. He'd been listening. Emma could tell by the softness in his eyes. "Show her," Frank said to Marcus. "Show her what you've built." Marcus hesitated, but Frank was already handing the album to Emma. She opened it and felt her heart stop. Page after page of photographs, children in wheelchairs Marcus had customized, teenagers with adaptive equipment he'd designed, a little boy grinning on a modified tricycle, a girl about Emma's age standing with walker supports that looked nothing like medical equipment. They were decorated with flowers and butterflies. "These families can't afford the fancy stuff," Frank explained. "Insurance won't cover anything that isn't strictly necessary. But Marcus, he makes it beautiful. Makes these kids feel special instead of different." Emma turned the pages slowly, each image hitting her like a revelation. "You never charge them?" "Never." Marcus's voice was firm. "This isn't about money. It's about Lily. Every kid I help. She's there, dancing through them, living through them." Emma looked up, tears falling freely now. "You could help me. You see something the doctors don't. I know you do. That first day when you looked at my braces, you saw something wrong. Why didn't you say anything?" Marcus exchanged a glance with Frank. "Because your mother would never let someone like me near her daughter. I'm not a doctor, not certified, not qualified, just a mechanic with some ideas and a lot of grief." "You're more than that." Emma stood, her braces clicking as she rose. "You're the first person in 3 years who's actually seen me. Not my condition, not my limitations, me." The garage fell silent. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Help me," Emma said. "Please, help me dance at my sweet 16. Not for me, for Lily, for both of us." Before Marcus could respond, the sound of tires on gravel cut through the moment. A car door slammed. Heels clicked against concrete. Victoria Ashford appeared in the garage doorway, her face pale with fury. "Emma, get in the car, now!" Emma didn't move. "Mum, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly. You've been lying to me for 2 weeks. Sneaking out to this place with this man." Victoria's eyes swept over Marcus with barely concealed contempt. "I don't know what you've been telling my daughter, but it ends today. Emma, car now." Emma straightened her spine, something she rarely did because it made her hips ache. She looked at her mother with an expression Victoria had never seen before. Defiance, hope, certainty. "He's helping me, Mum. Actually helping me. My hip hasn't hurt in 3 days. Did you even notice?" Victoria's mouth opened, but no words came out. She hadn't noticed. In her endless planning and scheduling and worrying, she hadn't noticed that her daughter had been pain-free for 3 days. The silence stretched between them, filled with years of missed moments. Finally, Emma spoke again, her voice quieter now but no less firm. "I want to dance at my sweet 16. And Marcus is going to help me do it. The only question is whether you're going to stand in my way or stand beside me." Victoria looked at her daughter, really looked, for the first time, in longer than she could remember, and something in her began to crack. Victoria stood in the garage doorway like a statue carved from ice. Her designer coat was still perfect, her hair still immaculate, but her eyes burned with something between fury and terror. "I said, get in the car, Emma. Now." Emma didn't move. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice held steady. "Not until you listen." "Listen?" Victoria stepped inside, her heels striking the concrete like gunshots. "Listen to what? To how my daughter has been sneaking around behind my back? To how she's been spending time with a complete stranger instead of focusing on her recovery?" She turned her gaze to Marcus, and the contempt in her expression could have frozen fire. "And you? I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but it ends right now. Stay away from my daughter." Marcus remained calm. He'd faced anger before, from grieving families, from frustrated customers, from himself in the mirror at 3 in the morning. This was different, though. This was a mother protecting her child. "Mom, I understand you're upset." "Upset?" Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I'm not upset. I'm furious. My daughter has a medical condition that requires professional care, real doctors, real specialists. Not some—" She gestured at the garage, at the oil stains and old tools and humble surroundings. "Some grease monkey with delusions of grandeur." "Mom!" Emma's voice cracked. "Don't talk to him like that. I'll talk to him however I please. He has no right to interfere with your treatment. No qualifications, no credentials, no— He has results." The words cut through Victoria's tirade like a blade. Emma stepped forward, her braces clicking against the floor, but her posture straighter than Victoria had seen in months. 3 days without pain, Mom. 3 days. Do you know how long it's been since I went 3 hours without my hip aching? Do you have any idea what that means to me?" Victoria's mouth opened, then closed. The anger in her face flickered, replaced momentarily by something that looked almost like shame. That's not possible. Dr. Morrison said the pain was normal, part of the adjustment process. Dr. Morrison was wrong." Emma's voice softened. Marcus noticed something none of the specialists caught. The angle on my left brace was off. 2 degrees. It's been forcing my hip to compensate for 2 years. Victoria turned to Marcus, her expression shifting from contempt to confusion. 2 degrees? That's nothing. That couldn't possibly— It's everything. Marcus finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. 2 degrees doesn't sound like much, but when you're walking hundreds of steps a day, that tiny misalignment adds up. Muscles strain to compensate, joints shift to balance. Pain becomes constant. He walked to his workbench and picked up the worn folder, the same one he'd shown Emma days before. He held it out to Victoria. "I'm not a doctor, I know that, but I've spent 5 years studying biomechanics, mobility assistance, and adaptive equipment. Not for a degree, not for money, for her." He pointed to the photograph on the wall. Lily, with her bright smile and purple dress and leg braces that looked so much like Emma's. Victoria looked at the photo, then back at Marcus. "Who is she?" "My sister, Lily. She died 5 years ago." The garage fell silent. Even the radio seemed to fade into nothing. "She had mobility issues from birth," Marcus continued, his voice steady despite the pain underneath. "Doctors said she'd never walk without braces. Never dance. Never have a normal life." He pulled something from beneath his coveralls, a chain around his neck with a small worn photograph attached. He held it gently, like it might break. "This is the last picture I have of her, taken the morning of her school talent show, the day she was finally going to dance on stage." Victoria stared at the tiny photograph. A girl frozen in time, beaming with anticipation, unaware of what was coming. "I was supposed to be there," Marcus said. "Front row, I promised her, but I got called into work. Emergency repair for some executive who needed his car before a meeting." His jaw tightened. "I chose the money. Told myself I'd make it for the second half. Told Lily I'd be there for her solo." He paused. "She never made it to the school. Another driver ran a red light while she was crossing the street. She died 20 minutes before her show was supposed to start." Victoria felt something crack inside her chest. Not anger anymore. Something deeper. "I wasn't there," Marcus finished. "I broke my promise, and I've spent every day since trying to make up for it." He gestured to the corner of the garage, the wheelchairs, the adaptive bicycles, the modified equipment. "I build these for kids who can't afford the fancy stuff. Kids like Lily, kids like Emma. Because every time I help one of them, Lily gets to live a little longer." The silence stretched between them. Victoria looked at the photograph in Marcus's hand, at the equipment in the corner, at her daughter standing tall despite the braces that should have kept her small. "Why?" Victoria whispered. "Why help Emma? You don't know us." "Because I saw her through the window that first day, saw her braces, saw her pain." Marcus met Victoria's eyes. "And I saw someone who reminded me of everything I lost." Emma reached for her mother's hand. Victoria flinched at the touch. When had her daughter last reached for her willingly? "Mom, I know you're scared. I know you blame yourself for what happened to me, but you can't fix me by scheduling more appointments. You can't undo the accident by throwing money at specialists." Victoria's face crumpled. The mask she'd worn for 3 years began to slip. "You don't understand," she said, her voice breaking. "You don't know what I did. I know you were driving." Emma's voice was gentle now. "I know you blame yourself. You don't know." Victoria pulled away, wrapping her arms around herself like she was holding pieces together. "You don't know what it was like." She turned to face the wall, unable to meet anyone's eyes. "Richard and I were coming home from his birthday dinner. He'd just turned 50. We'd had champagne, we were happy." Her voice cracked on the word. "And I heard my phone buzz. Work email. Something about the quarterly reports." Her shoulders began to shake. "I looked down for 2 seconds, just 2 seconds. I didn't see the truck until Richard screamed." Frank appeared in the doorway, drawn by the sound of Victoria's braking. He didn't speak, just stood quietly, bearing witness. "He tried to grab the wheel," Victoria continued, tears streaming now. "But I'd already started to turn. The truck hit his side. His side. Because I turned wrong, because I was looking at my phone instead of the road." She collapsed against the workbench, years of suppressed grief finally breaking free. "Richard died instantly. They told me he didn't suffer. But Emma was trapped for 45 minutes before they could get her out. And I walked away without a scratch, not a single scratch." Emma moved toward her mother, braces clicking with each careful step. "Mom, don't." Victoria held up a hand. "Don't tell me it wasn't my fault. Don't tell me accidents happen. I killed my husband, I crippled my daughter, and every day since I've tried to fix what I broke. But I can't. I can't fix any of it." Marcus watched the scene unfold, memories of his own confession to Emma echoing in his mind. He understood this moment, the shattering of walls built to keep pain at bay. "Mrs. Ashford," his voice was soft, "I spent 3 years blaming myself for Lily's death, telling myself that if I'd just been there, if I'd made different choices, she'd still be alive." Victoria looked up, mascara streaking her cheeks. "But guilt doesn't bring them back. It just keeps us from living, keeps us from seeing what's right in front of us." He nodded toward Emma. "Your daughter isn't broken. She's standing right there, stronger than she's been in years, asking you to see her. Not her condition, not her limitations. Her." Victoria turned to Emma, really seeing her for the first time in longer than she could remember. The determination in her daughter's eyes, the hope, the strength that no accident could take away. "I miss him too, Mom." Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "I miss Dad every single day. But he wouldn't want this. He wouldn't want you drowning in guilt while I drown in doctors' offices." She took another step closer. "Remember what he used to say? When I was little and I'd fall down while dancing?" Victoria's breath caught. "Emma. He'd pick me up and say, 'Angels don't quit, sweetheart. They just find new ways to fly.'" The words hung in the air like a prayer. Victoria broke. Not the controlled tears of a woman maintaining composure, but the raw, ugly sobbing of someone finally releasing years of poison. Emma reached her mother and wrapped her arms around her. For the first time since the accident, they held each other without barriers, without appointments to discuss or treatments to schedule, just a mother and daughter grieving together. Frank moved quietly to Marcus's side. "Sometimes," the old man murmured, "the deepest wounds heal when we stop trying to fix them and just let someone hold us." Marcus nodded, thinking of all the nights he'd spent alone in his apartment, refusing comfort, convinced he deserved the pain. It had taken Frank years to break through those walls. After what felt like hours, Victoria pulled back. Her face was ruined, makeup smeared, eyes swollen, but something had changed. The hardness was gone. In its place was something fragile and new. "The braces," she said, turning to Marcus. "You really think you can help her?" "I can try, but not alone." Marcus held her gaze. "Emma needs you in this, not planning or scheduling, just being there, being her mum." Victoria wiped her face with trembling hands. "I don't know how to do that anymore. I've spent so long trying to fix things." "Then we learn together." Emma took her mother's hand. "That's what I said before, remember?" Victoria managed a watery smile. "You did say that. I meant it." Frank stepped forward, offering Victoria a paper towel from a roll near the workbench. She took it with a surprised laugh, the first genuine laugh any of them had heard from her. "I must look terrible." "You look like someone who finally stopped running," Frank said gently. "That's not terrible, that's brave." Victoria looked around the garage, at the humble equipment, the photographs, the evidence of years of quiet service. Her eyes landed on the album still sitting on the workbench. She opened it, flipping through pages of smiling children on customized wheelchairs, adapted bicycles, modified walkers covered in butterflies and flames. "This little girl," Victoria pointed to a photograph, "she's using a walker with flowers. Marisol, 7 years old, picked every flower herself." Marcus smiled at the memory. Victoria closed the album. When she looked up, there were fresh tears, but different ones this time. "I've spent a fortune on specialists, thousands of dollars per appointment, equipment that costs more than cars." She shook her head. "And none of them ever made Emma smile the way she smiled when she told me her hip didn't hurt." "Money can buy treatment," Frank observed, "but it can't buy seeing someone for who they really are." Victoria turned to Marcus with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Will you help my daughter dance at her sweet 16? Marcus looked at Emma, saw the hope blazing in her eyes, and felt something shift in his chest. A door opening, a promise waiting to be kept. "I'll do everything I can." Emma's smile could have lit the entire garage. Victoria nodded slowly, the movement carrying weight of surrender and acceptance. "Then tell me what you need. And please," she hesitated, vulnerability plain on her face, "teach me how to help instead of fix." Outside, the sun had fully set. Stars were beginning to appear through the garage's dusty windows. And somewhere, in a place beyond sight, but not beyond feeling, a little girl in leg braces watched her brother finally begin to heal. 3 weeks changed everything. Every afternoon at 4 o'clock, Victoria's black Escalade pulled into the gravel lot of Santos Auto Repair. But unlike before, she didn't stay in the car or pace while making phone calls. She parked, walked inside, and sat on the old wooden bench near the window, the same bench Emma had claimed that first rainy day. And she watched. At first, watching was torture. Every instinct screamed at Victoria to intervene, to suggest, to fix. When Emma stumbled during her exercises, Victoria's hands would fly up involuntarily, ready to catch her. When Marcus adjusted the braces, Victoria bit her tongue against 1,000 questions about credentials and certifications, but she stayed silent. She watched, and slowly, she began to see. Marcus worked with a patience Victoria had never witnessed in any specialist. He didn't rush Emma through exercises or push her toward arbitrary milestones. Instead, he observed, adjusted, and waited. When Emma grew frustrated, he didn't offer empty encouragement. He simply asked, "What does your body need right now?" It was a question no doctor had ever asked. By the end of the first week, Emma was walking across the garage without stopping, something she hadn't done in 2 years. The distance was only 30 feet, but Victoria had to leave the room to cry where her daughter couldn't see. Frank found her outside, leaning against the brick wall, tears streaming. "Happy tears or sad tears?" he asked gently. "I don't know," Victoria admitted. "Both, maybe. I've spent 3 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars on specialists, and in 1 week, a mechanic in Ohio has done more than all of them combined." Frank settled beside her, leaning against the wall. "Marcus isn't just a mechanic. He's a man who turned grief into a gift. How did he learn all this? Books, online courses, physical therapists who answered his questions." Frank smiled. "After Lily died, he didn't sleep for almost a year, spent every night studying, building. Said if he couldn't save his sister, he'd save someone else's." Victoria wiped her eyes. "He mentioned that she died on the way to a talent show, that he wasn't there. Worst day of his life. Boy blamed himself so completely I thought we'd lose him too." Frank's voice grew heavy. "Found him one night sitting in the garage with all the lights off, just sitting there staring at nothing. That's when I knew I had to step in." "Step in how?" "Gave him a job, gave him purpose, made him part of something bigger than his pain." Frank looked at Victoria with knowing eyes. "Sometimes the best thing we can do for someone drowning in guilt is give them a reason to keep swimming." Victoria thought about her own guilt, the weight she'd carried for 3 years, the desperate attempts to fix what couldn't be undone. She thought about Richard, about the champagne they'd shared at dinner, about the work email that had cost her everything. "Does it ever get easier?" she asked quietly. "The guilt?" Frank considered the question. "My Maria died 8 years ago. Cancer. Took her slow, which was almost worse than fast." He paused. "I spent 2 years angry at God, at doctors, at myself for not noticing the signs earlier. Thought if I'd just paid more attention, caught it sooner. What changed? I realized that guilt was keeping me from honoring her memory. Maria wouldn't want me drowning in what-ifs. She'd want me living, helping others." He nodded toward the garage. "So I opened this place to Marcus when he needed somewhere to belong, and every time I see him help a kid like Emma, I feel Maria smiling." Victoria looked through the dusty window at her daughter, who was laughing at something Marcus had said while adjusting her brace straps. Laughing. When had Emma last laughed like that? "I've been so focused on fixing her," Victoria murmured. "I forgot to just be with her." "Fixing is easy," Frank said. "It gives us something to do with our hands. Being present is harder. It means sitting with the pain instead of running from it." Victoria nodded slowly, absorbing the wisdom from this man she would have dismissed without a second glance just a month ago. Inside the garage, Emma called out, "Mom, come watch this." Victoria pushed off the wall and walked inside. Emma was standing at one end of the garage, Marcus at the other. Between them stretched 40 feet of concrete floor, the longest distance Emma had attempted yet. "Ready?" Marcus asked. Emma nodded, her face set with determination. She took the first step, then another. Her braces clicked softly against the floor, but her movement was smoother now, more natural. Her hips weren't compensating the way they used to. Her shoulders stayed level, instead of dipping with each stride. 20 feet, 30 feet. Victoria's hand drifted to her mouth without her realizing it. 35 feet. Emma's leg trembled slightly, but she didn't stop. 40 feet. She reached Marcus and grabbed his arm for support, breathing hard but grinning. "Did you see that?" Emma's voice was breathless with triumph. "Did you see?" Victoria couldn't speak. Tears blurred her vision as she crossed the garage and pulled her daughter into a fierce embrace. "I saw," she whispered. "I saw everything." Over Emma's shoulder, she caught Marcus's eye. He nodded once, a simple acknowledgement that carried the weight of everything they'd been through. The second week brought new challenges. Marcus introduced exercises to strengthen Emma's core, reducing her dependence on the braces. Victoria watched her daughter sweat and struggle and refused to give up. But it was the third week that changed everything. Marcus had been working on something in secret, staying late at the garage, covering his workbench with a tarp whenever Victoria and Emma arrived. Emma pestered him with questions, but he just smiled and said, "Patience. Good things take time." On the Friday of the third week, Victoria arrived at the garage wearing a red evening gown. She'd come directly from a charity luncheon, not wanting to miss Emma's afternoon session. The dress was elegant, designer, completely out of place in the oil-stained garage, but Victoria no longer cared about such things. "Fancy," Frank commented with a grin. "Charity event. Couldn't miss Emma's session." Victoria smoothed the red fabric. "I feel ridiculous." "You look beautiful," Emma said, emerging from the back of the garage. "Like you used to look before." The words hit Victoria like a wave. Before the accident, before the guilt, before she'd stopped caring about anything except fixing her daughter. "Thank you, sweetheart." Marcus appeared from behind the tarp-covered workbench, wiping his hands on a rag. "Good timing. I have something to show you both." He pulled the tarp away, revealing his secret project. On the workbench sat a pair of leg braces unlike anything Victoria had ever seen. They were sleek, lightweight, constructed from some kind of carbon fiber material. But that wasn't what made them special. They were beautiful. Delicate silver scrollwork traced along the supports. Tiny crystals caught the light like captured stars. The padding was covered in soft purple fabric, Lily's favorite color. "I've been working on these for 2 weeks, Marcus said quietly. "They're based on everything I've learned about Emma's specific needs. Lighter than her current braces, more flexible, better support angles." Emma reached out to touch them, her fingers trembling. "They're gorgeous." "They're functional," Marcus corrected. "The beauty is just a bonus." He glanced at the photograph of Lily on the wall. "My sister always said that just because something helps you doesn't mean it has to look medical." She wanted braces that made her feel special, not different. Victoria stared at the craftsmanship, the hours of work evident in every detail. "Marcus, these must have taken 200 hours, give or take," he shrugged. I don't sleep much anyway. Can I try them? Emma's voice was barely a whisper. That's why I made them. The next 20 minutes were a blur of adjustments and fittings. Marcus worked with careful precision, checking every strap, every angle, every point of contact. Victoria watched in silence, her red gown pooling around her feet as she sat on the old wooden bench. Finally, Marcus stepped back. Okay, try standing. Emma pushed herself up from the chair. The new braces were so light she barely felt them. She took a tentative step, then another, her eyes widening. They don't hurt. Mum, they don't hurt at all. Walk to me, Victoria said, standing and moving to the far end of the garage. Show me what you can do. Emma started walking, but something was different this time. Without the constant pain she'd grown accustomed to, her body moved more freely. Her steps were longer, more confident. Her posture straightened naturally. Halfway across the garage, she stopped. Mum, I want to try something. Before anyone could respond, Emma reached down and began unfastening the braces. Emma, wait! Victoria started forward. Trust me. Emma's voice was calm, certain. I need to try. She removed the first brace, then the second. For a moment she stood completely unsupported, her legs bare, the scars from surgery visible in the garage light. Then she took a step. Victoria's hand flew to her mouth. Her legs went weak, and she grabbed the workbench for support. Emma took another step, and another. She was walking, actually walking, without braces, without support, without anyone holding her up. Her steps were slow, careful, but steady. Each one was a victory over every doctor who'd said this was as good as it gets. Each one was a triumph over 3 years of pain and limitation and being told to accept her circumstances. Victoria couldn't breathe. Tears poured down her face, ruining her makeup, staining the collar of her red gown. Her hand pressed hard against her mouth as sobs shook her entire body. Mom. Emma's voice was thick with emotion. Mom, look at me. Victoria looked, really looked. Her daughter was standing in the middle of Santos Auto Repair, walking on her own 2 legs, tears streaming down her face to match her mother's. Behind her, Marcus watched with wet eyes, one hand pressed against the photograph he wore over his heart. Frank stood in the doorway, openly crying, thinking of Maria and all the miracles she would have loved to see. I'm walking, Mum. Emma laughed through her tears. I'm actually walking. Victoria rushed forward and caught her daughter in her arms. They collapsed together onto the concrete floor, holding each other, laughing and crying and releasing 3 years of grief and fear and desperate hope. I see you, Victoria whispered into Emma's hair. I finally see you. Emma pulled back, her face radiant despite the tears. That's all I ever wanted. Outside the garage, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The light streamed through the windows, catching the crystals on Emma's new braces where they lay on the floor. Marcus knelt to pick them up. He looked at Lily's photograph, then at Emma in her mother's arms. She's dancing now, he murmured. Through you, she's finally dancing. Victoria heard him. She crossed the garage and placed her hand on his shoulder. Thank you, she said, for seeing what I couldn't, for believing when I'd given up. Marcus shook his head. I didn't do anything special. I just saw her, the way someone should have seen Lily. That's everything, Victoria said. That's absolutely everything. Emma joined them, still unsteady on her feet but refusing to sit down. She looked at her mother, at Marcus, at Frank wiping his eyes in the doorway. I want to dance at my sweet 16, she announced. Really dance. Not just sway in place while everyone feels sorry for me. Victoria laughed, a genuine joyful sound that surprised even her. Then we'd better start practicing. Emma grinned. Actually, I was thinking Marcus could teach me. He's been teaching me everything else. Marcus looked startled. I'm not a dancer. Neither am I, but we figured out walking. How hard can dancing be? Frank chuckled from the doorway. Famous last words. As the sun finished its descent and stars began appearing, the 4 of them stood together in the humble garage. A wealthy widow, her resilient daughter, a grieving mechanic, and a wise old man who recognized miracles when they happened. And somewhere, watching from a place beyond pain and regret, a little girl in a purple dress smiled. Her brother had finally kept his promise. Marcus sat in his truck outside the Millbrook Community Center, engine off, hands gripping the steering wheel. Through the windshield, he could see the building transformed. White lights wrapped around the entrance. Balloons in silver and purple, Lily's favorite color, swayed in the evening breeze. Cars filled the parking lot, and people streamed through the front doors. He didn't belong in there. Marcus looked down at his clothes. Clean khakis, a button-down shirt Frank had ironed for him, shoes that actually matched. It was the nicest he'd looked in years, but nice clothes didn't change who he was. A mechanic who fixed cars in a dusty garage. A knock on his window made him jump. Frank stood outside wearing his one good suit, the same one he'd worn to Maria's funeral 8 years ago. His silver hair was combed back, and he held a small flower in his lapel. Marcus rolled down the window. "Planning to watch from out here all night?" Frank asked, his voice gentle but knowing. "Maybe." Marcus stared at the community center. "This is her moment, her family. I don't want to intrude." Frank opened the truck door and leaned against the frame. "Son, after everything you've done, you are family. That's how it works. I just keep thinking about Lily." Marcus's voice cracked. "How she never got this. A party. People watching her dance. So, give it to her." Frank placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Through Emma. That's how we honor the ones we've lost. We keep living for them." Marcus closed his eyes. 5 years of guilt. Tonight felt like standing at the edge of something he wasn't sure he deserved. "What if I fall apart in there? Then you fall apart, and we'll help put the pieces back together. That's what family does." Before Marcus could respond, another figure appeared beside Frank. Victoria, in a simple navy dress, elegant but understated, nothing like the armor she used to wear. "You're not coming in?" she asked. "I wasn't sure if I should." Victoria smiled warmly. "Marcus, you gave me my daughter back. You gave me myself back." She extended her hand. "Please, Emma's been asking for you." Marcus looked at her hand, then at Frank's encouraging nod. Slowly, he stepped out of the truck. Victoria linked her arm through his as they walked toward the entrance. "I owe you a real apology. You already apologized. Not for everything." She paused at the door. "When I walked into your garage, I saw someone beneath me. But my husband Richard started as a mechanic, built his company from nothing." Tears glistened in her eyes. "I fell in love with him because he was kind and hard-working. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that." She squeezed his arm. "Thank you for reminding me." Inside, the community center had been transformed into something magical. Strings of lights crisscrossed the ceiling like captured stars. Tables covered in white linen surrounded a wooden dance floor. A local DJ played soft music, while people mingled and laughed. But it wasn't the decorations that made Marcus stop in his tracks. It was the people. Families from the neighborhood filled the room, including many he recognized. The Garcias, whose son Miguel now rode the adaptive bicycle Marcus had built. Mrs. Patterson and her daughter Sophie, who used the custom walker with painted butterflies. The Hendersons, whose twins shared a modified wheelchair designed for two. They were all here, all watching, all waiting. Emma stood near the main table, surrounded by friends from school. She wore a simple white dress that made her look older than 15, and her blonde hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders. Her new braces, the ones Marcus had built with crystals and purple fabric, peeked out beneath her hem. When she saw Marcus, her face lit up. "You came!" She rushed toward him, moving faster than she ever had before, and threw her arms around his neck. "I was afraid you wouldn't." "Wouldn't miss it," Marcus managed, his voice thick. Emma pulled back, grinning. "Mom told me you were hiding in the parking lot." "I wasn't hiding, I was gathering courage." "Well, gather faster, we've got dancing to do." The next hour passed in a blur of cake and conversation. Marcus found himself surrounded by families he'd helped, each sharing stories. "Miguel rode his bike to school last week," Mrs. Garcia said, tears in her eyes. "First time ever." "Sophie won't go anywhere without her walker," Mrs. Patterson added. "She calls it her butterfly wings." Marcus didn't know what to say. He'd built those things alone in his garage, never expecting recognition. It had always been about Lily. But standing here, surrounded by evidence of what grief transformed into purpose could accomplish, something shifted inside him. Maybe Lily wasn't just living through these children. Maybe she was living through him too. The DJ's voice cut through the noise. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for a very special moment. Please clear the dance floor for our birthday girl and her mother." The crowd parted. Emma and Victoria walked to the center of the room, hand in hand. The music changed. A slow, beautiful song that Marcus didn't recognize, but he saw Victoria's face crumple for just a moment, and he understood. This must have been Richard's favorite song. Emma took her mother's hands. "Ready?" Victoria nodded, unable to speak. They began to move. Slowly at first, Victoria leading gently, supporting her daughter without controlling her. Emma's steps were careful but confident, nothing like the struggling, painful movements of just weeks ago. The crowd watched in hushed amazement. Step by step, Emma grew bolder. Her posture straightened. Her movements became more fluid. She was dancing, really dancing, for the first time in 3 years. Victoria was crying openly now, tears streaming down her face, but she didn't stop moving, didn't stop holding her daughter, didn't stop being present in the way Marcus had taught her. By the end of the song, both of them were laughing through their tears, holding each other in the middle of the dance floor, while the room erupted in applause. But Emma wasn't finished. She stepped back from her mother, wiping her eyes, and turned to scan the crowd. Her gaze found Marcus standing near the back, trying to stay invisible. "Marcus," her voice carried across the room, "come here." He shook his head, backing toward the wall. "Please." Emma walked toward him, steady and sure, the crowd parting for her like water. "Dance with me." "I can't. I don't." "For Lily." Emma reached him and took his hand. "She's here, Marcus. I can feel her. She's been waiting 5 years to dance with her brother." Marcus's vision blurred. He looked at Emma's outstretched hand, saw the hope shining in her eyes, and felt something crack open inside him. "I don't know how to dance," he whispered. "Neither did I. But angels don't quit, remember? They just find new ways to fly." The words hit Marcus like a wave. Richard's phrase, the one Emma had shared in the garage, the one that had started Victoria's transformation. His hand trembled as he placed it in hers. The music began again, something soft and gentle, and Emma led him to the center of the dance floor. The room had gone completely silent. Every eye watched as the teenage girl and the mechanic began to move. Marcus was stiff at first, terrified of making a mistake, but Emma guided him with patience he recognized, the same patience he'd shown her during weeks of rehabilitation. "Close your eyes," she whispered. "Picture her, picture Lily." Marcus obeyed, and suddenly he wasn't in the community center anymore. He was backstage at Millbrook Elementary 5 years ago. Lily was there, bouncing with excitement in her purple dress, her leg braces decorated with the star stickers she'd insisted on adding herself. "I'm going to dance, Marcus, really dance, and you'll be there to see it." "Front row," he'd promised. "I'll clap so loud they'll have to turn up the music." The memory shifted. The school stage transformed into the community center dance floor. But Lily was still there, holding his hands instead of Emma's, guiding him through the steps she'd practiced so many times in their living room. "I'm sorry," Marcus whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there." And in his mind, Lily smiled, the same radiant smile from the photograph he'd carried for 5 years. "You're here now, Marcus. That's all that matters." Emma felt the change in him. She watched his expression shift from grief to wonder, to something that looked almost like peace. She didn't know what he was seeing behind his closed eyes, but she knew it was exactly what he needed. The song ended. Marcus opened his eyes, and the community center swam back into focus. Emma stood before him, crying and smiling at the same time. "She was dancing," he said, his voice barely audible. "I saw her. She was finally dancing." Emma squeezed his hands. "She's been dancing through all of us, Marcus. Every kid you've helped, every family you've touched, she never stopped." The room remained silent for a long moment. Then, from somewhere near the back, applause began. It spread like wildfire until everyone was clapping, cheering, many wiping away their own tears. Victoria stepped forward, taking a microphone from the DJ. Her voice shook as she began to speak. 3 years ago, I thought I'd lost everything. My husband, my daughter's future, my own soul." She paused, composing herself. "I spent all that time trying to fix what was broken, throwing money at specialists, scheduling appointments, refusing to accept that some things can't be bought." She looked at Marcus, at Emma, at Frank standing near the door. "Then I met a mechanic in a small garage in Millbrook, a man who taught me that healing doesn't come from treatments or checkbooks. It comes from being seen, really seen, by someone who understands what it means to carry guilt, to lose someone you love, to wake up every day wondering if you deserve to keep going." Victoria's voice strengthened. Marcus Rivera spent 5 years honoring his sister's memory by helping children like Emma. He never asked for recognition, never wanted payment. He just showed up day after day, turning his grief into something beautiful. She looked directly at Marcus now. "True wealth isn't what we own. It's who we lift when they fall. It's showing up for people when it costs us something. It's choosing love over guilt, presence over fixing, connection over pride. She raised an invisible glass to Marcus, to Lily, to everyone who's ever found the courage to keep dancing even when the music stopped. The room echoed the toast. Emma rushed to hug Marcus again. Victoria joined them, and then Frank, his weathered arms wrapping around all three. Later, as the party wound down and guests began to leave, Marcus found himself outside, looking up at the stars. Frank appeared beside him, holding 2 cups of punch. "Maria would have loved tonight," the old man said softly. "She always believed in miracles." "I didn't think I deserved one," Marcus admitted. "None of us do. That's what makes them miracles." Emma and Victoria emerged from the community center, arm in arm, laughing about something. They walked toward Marcus, and Emma reached out to shake his hand, a formal gesture that made him smile. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." Marcus clasped her hand firmly. "Thank you for not giving up. On yourself, on your mom, on me." Victoria hugged him last, a real hug, not the stiff gesture of a woman who thought she was better than everyone else. "You'll come to dinner next week, both of you?" She looked at Frank. "Wouldn't miss it," Frank said. As Victoria and Emma walked to their car, Marcus watched them go. 2 figures against the starlit sky, walking side by side, their shadows merging into one. He pulled out his phone, opened the photo of Lily, and smiled at her face for the first time without feeling crushed by grief. "We did it, little one," he whispered. "You finally got your dance." That night, Marcus slept without nightmares for the first time in 5 years. And somewhere in a place beyond pain and regret, a little girl in a purple dress twirled among the stars, finally free, dancing with angels here and there.